We've been waiting patiently for the dev Q&A ever since Super Helen gave us the opportunity to ask some questions to the developers about the game. I was excited when I woke up this morning because I saw this developer feedback post in the official Discord. If you're not already over there, I highly encourage you to join the official Discord so that you'll get updates like this on a regular basis. If you didn't have an opportunity to participate in the dev Q&A this time, hopefully someone else was able to ask one of the questions that you had just a burning desire to know the answer to. And if not, there are going to be more of these in the future. So I highly encourage you to pay attention to the post that Super Helen makes, because that's going to give you a good indication for when the next one of these will show up. And in the meantime, if you do post your feedback on the game in the feedback section of the official Discord, you are very likely to have whatever question you have show up on the developer's desk, because Super Helen does pick the best questions from there to take to a weekly meeting that she has with the devs. With that out of the way, this is sort of going to be a live reaction video. I'll probably cut out some of the worst parts, but I'm just going to go through and read this post and try to react to some of the things that they've answered. And hopefully these are going to be things that will be really helpful for the community. It looks like the game's producer, David, was actually heavily involved in providing and curating the answers here. So I think this is going to give us a really good indication of what we can expect for the rest of this year, and then also bleeding into 2026. So the first question, we know DC Dark Legion draws most of its inspiration from the Dark Knight's Metal comic, but the DC universe is very vast. How do you decide which champions and factions to release next? How does the choice between introducing new factions versus building out existing ones factor into that decision? I think this is a really good question, and it's going to give us hopefully some answers as to why they only released 3 Outsiders, for example, and why there's only 4 Superman family. And the dev response was, the vastness of the DC universe is a blessing, but also a challenge when picking the next champion or faction. We plan roughly 10 champions ahead, balancing DC superheroes and DC supervillains, trying to keep the split roughly even. Team tags, trying to diversify rosters and filling gaps. Recognition, so mixing characters new and hardcore fans know. And then fun, so surprising us with unique picks like Crypto that we probably weren't exactly expecting, but a lot of the fans wanted. For factions, awareness is key. We prioritize instantly recognizable groups like the Justice League first. Then within those factions, we choose characters based on their strengths and the roles needed to round out the team, like adding Mira as a Justice League healer, which was a great decision, by the way. Right now, we're focused on building out those existing factions rather than adding brand new ones. That's also a good thing. We need more champions in the factions that aren't fully built out yet. We feel we've got a good selection already, and by filling them out more, we can create way more potential team combinations and choices. That means more battle variety and therefore fun for us in the community. And they go on to say, that's not to say we're definitely won't introduce new factions in the short term, but when we do, we'll be super thoughtful about how those characters fit into the existing roster. We know it takes time to build out a whole new faction team properly. Luckily, we are a live game, still early in our journey, just 6 months since global launch. We're looking forward to continuing to expand our roster for many years to come. With your support, we're hopeful we'll eventually feature everyone's favorites while still delivering surprise along the way. So they keep using this word surprise as we go through this post, and I think that's interesting. There must be a couple of other tricks up the sleeves, and I think it's pretty funny, the very last question, what was asked there. So we'll visit that one at the end of the video. My impressions here, I think it's a solid plan to try to go after building the factions that we do have. There are a lot of characters that fit into the factions and tags that we already have. And I think it's a positive thing that they're going to continue to go after those. We still have the Flash family and the Green Lantern Corps, who have not been built out at all. We just have one champion in each of those. And obviously we're about to be getting some of the Amazons. But then even once we get those, I think there's 2 Amazons that are coming at the end of the month from what the spoilers say. So we're still going to have a bunch of champions that are teams that are only 3 or 4 champions. So there's a lot of work to be done just to build out what we have. And we're probably going to see 15 or 20 more champions if I had to guess bleeding into next year before we start seeing new tags that come into the game, or at least that's my guess. Question 2. Do you have plans to release mythic champions through methods other than the bleed more often? How about more ways to obtain mythic, especially limited mythic shards? I love this question. This is one that a lot of us have been asking in the community. It's a big frustration point. A lot of other games, maybe not as much 4X strategy games, but a lot of RPGs and hero collectors have like definitive ways that you can grow your roster, that you can farm out champions, especially once those champions have been around for a while. You know, like Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes typically has a function where if the champion's been out for around 8 months to a year, it's way easier. They go on nodes that you can farm pretty easily, and then you can get those champions up higher. So I would expect that champions like Superman, the Joker, Scarecrow, Constantine, some of those like, big iconic champions from when the game started, we get a little bit closer to the 1 year anniversary of the launch. I hope that there are more ways for us to obtain them. So let's see what the devs have to say. For non-limited mythics, we've already added several new methods to obtain them since global launch, and we'll continue to do so. For example, we've already added random mythic champion shards in the league train, rotating champion shards in daily login rewards, and more selection of shards in the Meta Brawl shop. We'll also sometimes feature them in events like we did with crypto. In fact, we've got big plans along these lines coming up for Halloween. I believe they are talking about, it looks like Donna Troy is definitely going to be an event champion like crypto. And then also we have this variant situation going on that we still don't have a lot of information about, where it's not going to be a limited mythic, also not going to be a regular mythic, but definitely not going to be a legendary. So what is it? So I'm super happy to hear that they're going to be including these champions in more events. And I do think, to their credit, a lot of the ways they've added for us to obtain champions have definitely been helpful for us to grow our rosters out, especially for free-to-play players and light spenders who don't have the opportunity to push in the bleed and obtain more mother box pulls than those who spend. For limited mythics, our focus is still mainly on the bleed for now, but even so, we've made some improvements to long-term collection. We've added a chance for limited mythic bonus shards on all of your regular mythic draws, with a guarantee on your first 6. And we've also established a fixed schedule for return banners. Crucially, that bonus shard guarantee resets every time a banner reruns, so you'll always have that 100% guarantee to get bonus shards on your first 6 mythic draws under returning limited mythic banner. So I think that's great. I do think that even though there were some hiccups with it, the current bleed process is much more improved than the one that's put out at the time of global launch. But is this enough? I don't know. I think the frustration point that a lot of people have, devs, if you're listening, is that there's no definitive bleed calendar. There's no way for players at the start of their journey on a new server to know which champions are coming. Right now, we have been able to cobble together on our own some information from asking Naira, actually, how the bleed calendars work. But by the time we had 3 set bleed calendars for the game, you got the developers kind of pretty much changed that again. So now there's like 5 or 6 of them out there because of all the reruns. So I don't know what the vision is behind the scenes. I'm sure there is a purpose behind that. But at some point, we have to get away from the chaos, and we have to get to a point where everyone kind of knows what path they can take to get to certain champions and build certain teams. Right now, we kind of have that a little bit, but you don't know, like, depending on which server you're on, it's kind of hard to know which champions are going to be coming so that you can, plan your roster accordingly. And it's hard for me to give advice. I keep trying to come up with a bleed strategy guide, but then that's going to change if, one server is getting, Superman first, and then all of a sudden down the road, they make it where the first champion you get is Constantine. So kind of difficult to help people plan their rosters if we don't have that. But I do appreciate a lot of the changes that have been made, and I hope we'll continue to get some iterative changes here, and that the devs will listen to the feedback about, having like a solidified bleed calendar that makes sense for all players. Question 3, what is the process of developing a character? How do you determine their skills in class? And how do you choose certain faction tags and synergies over others? And the dev response, when developing a new character, we always start with a deep dive into the comics. We research heavily and brainstorm tons of ideas. Then it's multiple rounds of discussions with our designers, writers, and partners at Warner Brothers, Interactive Entertainment, and DC before we settle on a final design. Staying true to the lore is essential, but we also innovate where we can. The Superman family was a fun challenge. We didn't want the whole team feeling samey with super strength and laser eyes. We love to surprise you guys with fun new details like Connor Kent's guitar, inspired by a comic panel where he's rocking out on an air guitar, which pretty sure that guitar is not accurately depicted, but I guess that's something for all the lore experts and guitar experts. When a character's lore fits multiple factions, choosing the right one is tough. Of course, we try to choose the most representative one, but we also weigh game mechanics. What role will this champion play in their team? Take Harley Quinn. We were frequently asked why we chose her Birds of Prey tag over Arkham's Most Wanted. Lore justified either, but gameplay wise, Birds of Prey gave her more room to shine. We'd already designed her kit to include lifesteal, which fit perfectly with the Birds of Prey team buff. It's nice to get a little bit of insight into like where the devs' minds are on how to build champions out. Obviously, I think there are a lot of hurdles with the WB team and DC that probably play into this or factor into this a lot more than other things. I appreciate the explanation on Harley Quinn. I still think Birds of Prey is like the worst tag in the game, unfortunately, but that's neither here nor there. Definitely appreciate the devs taking some time to kind of explain the way their thought process for how they build out these champions, though. Moving right along, we've got question 4. How do you decide who gets a special legacy piece in the House of Secrets? Will you consider adding special legacy pieces for more of the regular mythics? What about more universal legacy pieces? When deciding who gets a House of Secrets legacy piece, we prioritize champion rarity first. All limited mythic champions get one. For other champions, we listen to community feedback. The Green Lantern legacy piece, for example, happened because players asked. As for probably whales asked. As for universal legacy pieces, we're open to considering them if the community wants them. That said, we need to carefully evaluate how new pieces affect cultivating balance. Recently, we got a lot of feedback that universal pieces were too difficult to cultivate. So right now, we've been focused on fixing that by adding more places to obtain mythic legacy piece supply. So if you have specific characters you want to see get a legacy piece or ideas about universal ones, keep letting us know. Well, I can let you know that a majority of the player base wants to have some sort of a unique legacy item for Batman, for starters. There's probably a few others that we could throw in that list, but the big one right now seems to be Batman, since the buffs to his kit really were not buffs at all, and he still is a terrible champion, which is sad. I do appreciate that the devs are trying to add some new legacy pieces in. These are very integral to the game, and it's fun to kind of play around with the ones that we do have available. You see a lot of interesting combinations where we're taking one champion's unique and using it on others, and it's just really nice to have that variety. It's one of the things that kind of like, sets rosters apart, and allows some people to be able to push up against teams that they wouldn't be able to take out otherwise. Question 5: can we expect more champion or faction rebalancing in the future? How do you decide if a champion or faction needs rebalancing? All right, here we go. This is one that probably a lot of people want to know the answer to, especially with the Queen Hippolyta changes that were implemented and then reverted. We've also seen, several champions, I would say, that have received buffs. Like Joker has received a ton of balances to not only his own kit, but also his unique legacy weapon. We've continued to see buffs for the Scarecrow kit as well. So several champions that have seen, a decent amount of changes over time. I'm curious to see what they have to say here. So all live games need balance tweaks sometimes. We thoroughly test every champion before launch, but we simply can't match the ingenuity of our players at scale. You guys discover strategies and comps we never considered, which can reveal a champion or faction performing in ways we never anticipated. We never take rebalancing lightly. Sticking to our core principles is crucial. Every champion and faction must have their place to shine. They should have clear strengths and weaknesses. That's what makes experimenting with new combinations fun. No champion should be meta everywhere, but each should excel in specific modes, teams, or as a counter. Well, that's an interesting comment. We can maybe come back to that. So, if feedback shows a champion isn't used in any mode or is constantly replaced in teams, that immediately flags them for review and potential buffs. Conversely, if so, basically the entire Birds of Prey faction and the entire Suicide Squad faction, and probably a couple of others. Conversely, if players report a champion seems too strong, but we see they're dominating only in modes or matchups they're designed to excel in, we'll likely conclude they're working as intended. On that note, we always try to avoid nerfing. If we do think a champion seems too strong, usually because they're excelling in a role we didn't intend them for, we'll prioritize buffing the opposition rather than nerfing that champion. The exception is bug fixes like incorrectly configured stats or skills triggering too often. This is actually just repairing effects we never intended, but it can feel like a nerf. To minimize the negative impact on our players as much as possible, we created a special multiversal force refund item specifically for these cases. And I do appreciate that. I think a lot of players do. Obviously, we had the situation with Dr. Fate where they adjusted the language in the kit. They didn't change anything about the kit, just the language that was being presented. And they gave a force refund for him. I used it and then immediately just added all the force back because I think Fate is a great champion. But I appreciate that they're allowing the option for people to get those refunds if they feel offended that they think a champion was nerfed for whatever reason. I do think it's interesting that they're talking about how no champion should be meta everywhere, but each should excel in specific modes, teams, or as a counter. I do appreciate that as a game balance feature. There are certain champions, though, that I would say do dominate in every mode, and I really don't want to see them get nerfed. I think AoE is a big part of the meta right now, and there are basically champions. Like I don't know how you fix that to where certain modes the AoE champions aren't effective anymore. I just don't see that being the case. But I will say, like a champion, let's take Joker, for example. I think they balanced him fairly well because he is like a beyond S tier in combat cycle or any long fights. I think he does really well in some of the anti-crime network challenges as well. But he's not going to do as well in Meta Brawl. And so like that their explanation here makes a lot of sense for most of the champions that are in the game now. Martian Manhunter, probably another good example, does really well to counter Justice League Dark, but doesn't really have anything else in his kit right now. All right, so question 6 is the last, I think, long-winded one here, and then we'll be able to move through the last 4 fairly quickly. The question asks here, what do your plans for the end game look like? How do you envision our daily gameplay? Will there be more base shelter vehicle upgrades, more league tech, more story, more bosses and training simulator levels? So really great question here. I think a lot of people are interested in the answer because we probably aren't quite at the full end game for the game. I know there are still game modes that they're planning on releasing, and so there's a lot of room for improvement. And the answer here from David's team, very timely question, as our end game is just starting to take shape. So that's good news that it's just starting to take shape and that all the ship combat isn't the full end game. Our overall vision is that the end game should be defined by PvP action and progression. Daily, that's bite-sized PvP like league train raids and meta brawl. Weekly, that's larger tournaments or league versus league events like 3v3, Guardian Challenge, Great Krypton Rush, Battle for Gotham, and most recently, Ultimate Battle for Gotham. The last couple of months, the majority of our dev focus has been on implementing these modes. We still plan to make consistent improvements to make them easier to understand, organize, and join. Most recently, we've started working on a popular request, a new asynchronous league versus league mode, meaning all members can contribute regardless of time zone. The in-game loop is that these systems provide rewarding loot, which goes into progressive upgrades and unlocks, leading to more powerful and challenging matchups. Of course, we'll also keep adding new story maps, combat cycle bosses, training sim themes, and vehicles. However, these require a cycle of new content plus completion and then waiting for more. The real potential for infinite gameplay lies in player interaction within PvP modes. Then, in the midst of these daily and weekly gameplay loops, You'll consistently level up your champions after each round of Battle for Gotham, gradually perfect your transmutes, and invest your chips and drones into the major new technology system we've recently started developing. Well, there's a lot to unpack here. Some of it I'm happy about, and some of it I am not exactly excited about. I do appreciate all of the effort that's gone into all of these PvP game modes, but most of them I just don't like. I do enjoy 3v3. I think that one is a pretty solid mode. I also think Meta Brawl is something I'm getting a little bit more used to. I hate and despise the fact that you can't manually control your champions. I don't really buy the argument that people are going to be sad that their teams got beat on defense, and they're going to quit playing the game mode or anything like that. Pretty much all the other games out there, like this one, like at least all the RPG hero collector type games, have modes where it's offline and you're able to do offense without the opposing team being able to defend it. I mean, that's kind of like the point, I would say, in a lot of those games. So kind of sad to see that they don't care about combat like that. Obviously, like Guardian Challenge, I think they've got a pretty good handle on that one. Great Krypton Rush is another mode that I actually find fun because it's a smaller group and you can do a little bit more coordination with it. But like honestly, Guardian Challenge and Battle for Gotham are so difficult to play for me because you can't see anything on the screen. I've tried to make videos on like how to, play Battle for Gotham and do it effectively, but it's kind of difficult when I'm scared I'm going to give someone an epileptic seizure whenever they're playing the game mode. There's way too much information on the screen, and I'm actually really surprised that they haven't done anything to try to fix the game mode so that it's a little bit easier on the eyes to play it. Unfortunately, I can't say that I'm having fun sitting in Battle for Gotham for 2 hours waiting to try to get my ships to show up at a place and not leave, so that I can actually get my personal rewards, and then also just to help the team win. There's just way too much going on there. I think there's a lot more balance that could be done for those game modes, and I really just wish that there was a focus on other game modes instead. But, that's kind of where we're at with it. I don't want to be too negative or too critical, but I guess this is my opportunity to be a little bit critical on some of these things. So I just want to put that out there. One of the questions that I asked, or one of the things that I've been very curious about, is whether there was going to be some sort of a league game mode that was asynchronous. Like basically you don't have to have everyone online all at the same time. I really wish they would just make that the case for something like Umbral Rift, or create a new boss fight that you could do like over the course of 24 hours using your roster. And it actually looks like, despite some information in the past that they might not be doing it, that they are working on an asynchronous league versus league mode where all members can contribute regardless of time zone. I really hope this isn't a pay to win mode where you basically just like, buy tickets, or Supreme Commander is, where you literally just spend more money to beat people. I really don't want that to be the focus of whatever this mode is, but I'm super excited to see that they're working on something like that. Question number 7, how do you determine gameplay rewards? Designing balanced yet valuable rewards is very complex. We follow these core principles: multiple layers, so sustain various engagement levels; teamwork, incentivize winning for the league, not just yourself; participation, reward players who show up and contribute; performance and ranking, recognize individual excellence; leadership, for specific events, allow leaders to allocate some rewards. If feedback says an event's rewards feel too low, we try to diagnose based on these principles. We ask ourselves questions like, are players feeling under rewarded for their effort? Is individual contribution not being recognized? And so on. But crucially, events must be fun. Rewards should be a bonus, not the main reason to play. If we get consistent reward complaints after addressing the principles above, we consider redesigning or simplifying the event itself. Well, I guess my thought is there probably should be more of an emphasis on the fun, because Battle for Gotham, in my estimation, is not a fun game mode. And you get horrible rewards for the ultimate Battle for Gotham. I do think the main Battle for Gotham, you get a really nice chunk of rewards if you win. Like if you're in one of the top leagues or if you're one of the top contributors, you're getting a lot of magic eyes. I think there's probably really good reward balance for that game mode, but I really wish that there was a design change for how Ultimate Battle for Gotham rewards work. Because if the idea is to try to reward player contribution, it's kind of difficult to do that. If you like, there are a lot of low level players who go into Ultimate Battle for Gotham and try to get personal points, and they can't. So it's like most of the rewards being tied to personal points, and then them not being able to get them. That's kind of a difficulty that we're facing as a community. We've got Combat Cycle, which is another one where the rewards really are just kind of terrible, especially for late game players. You really just don't get anything. Like 200 mirror cells per day on average is just kind of laughable, honestly. But I do appreciate the idea that like it is a fun game mode. Like it is my favorite game mode in the game, and I'll continue to go back and push and try to get the high score, or at least top 5 or top 10 every single day, because I enjoy the game mode, and it's where you can do a lot of testing and have fun with your roster. There's like infinite replayability basically to that mode. So they definitely nailed it in terms of like making that game mode fun. But then on the opposite side, the reward balance doesn't really seem that great. Like I wish that we could go back to a system where like every so often the rewards reset, so that you did feel like you're getting a little bit more, maybe every month, maybe every quarter. But it just kind of feels stale from a reward standpoint once you've been able to clear all the way through to the second phase. But overall, I mean, I appreciate that you do have to balance the rewards. You don't want everyone being able to just like amass massive amounts of resources into their account, because if they do that, like if you have a stockpile for cash, for example, we complained about cash being able to be stockpiled into the billions for the longest time, and finally added some ways for us to be able to use that up. No one wants a dead resource that's just sitting in their account doing nothing. And I think that is definitely can spell like chaos and basically the end for certain games if there's not an incentive structure. So I appreciate that there's a balance. I hope that that the devs will continue to try to balance some of these features as we go forward. All right, we're coming up on the end now. So question number 8, what are the top 3 things we can look forward to in upcoming updates? We have so much coming, but these are the top 3 things that I'm looking forward to. This is David speaking. New asynchronous League versus League event. I'm personally looking forward to that as well. Halloween event with new gameplay and 2 new champions. Super excited to see the 2 new Amazons that are coming into the game. I am going to be putting a lot of resources into them. So I'm looking forward to being able to share some of that content with you when it shows up. Further improvements to Guardian Challenge, Gotham, and Great Krypton Rush. I know I just went on a rant earlier. I'm really excited to hear that they're going to continue to optimize these game modes. Honestly, most of the dev energy probably should go into that. If they want those to be kind of the place that we sit on a regular basis, then I hope that they'll consider making some additional adjustments there. Excited to see that those things are up and coming. Question number 9, who is your favorite in-game character and why? I like that. It may sound silly, but Gatling Gal and the Jokers, think about what she represents: an ordinary nobody with no superpowers, living in a world filled with DC champions. Without the Dark Legion invasion, she'd still be a nobody. Now, she's fighting alongside Batman and Superman. Beyond her wildest dreams, she's cherishing this chance, giving it all her all beside DC superheroes and DC supervillains, making her fragile and ordinary life profoundly significant. That's what DC Dark Legion feels like to me, an ordinary guy cherishing my chance to achieve something great alongside our superstar community. Well, I appreciate the insight into David's thinking, and pretty cool choice to make there. And I think the moment that we've all been waiting for, question number 10, when are we getting Bat-Cow? And this, if you're not on the official Discord, this was was and still is a meme over in the general chat over there where there's a lot of us who really like the DC Super Pets, and we're just kind of like pushing the narrative for some of the champions that we'd like to see. Since crypto came to the game, the devs have kind of opened up this can of worms, and basically everybody has asked, like, when are we getting back Cal? I think it was like the highest commented or the highest emoji reacted question to the devs was, when are we getting back Cal? And they said that they're genuinely surprised but delighted by the community's enthusiasm for Bat Cow. And for now, he says, I did tell you we like surprises. So, man, if we get Bat Cow in the next couple of months, it's going to be hilarious that the community drove the devs to put a champion like that into the game. I mean, even if there's just some sort of like weird cameo and it's not like a fully playable champion, I'll take it. I think it's kind of funny, like really cool that we were able to contribute to the Zeitgeist for something like that. But well, that's going to be all the time we have for this video on the dev feedback. Typically, I don't read through every single question or every single response on the community newsletters and that sort of thing. But I just felt like it would be a good way for us to go through this together. I did not have any like prior information on what was in here except for seeing question 10 accidentally. But I think it's a good way to showcase all of the information that the devs are working with. And this is like the best insight that we're going to get into what their plans are. Still feel like there's a little bit of veiled information around what's going to be coming down the pipeline, but hopefully Helen will be able to put out another roadmap for the game within the next month or two, and we'll get an insight into kind of what's going to be happening. Super excited again for all the late October events. I know we haven't gotten too much so far this month, but I'm hoping we will be pleasantly surprised by what's going to show up around Halloween. So that's going to do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you liked about what the devs had to say, and maybe let me know what you still have a question about, like what still needs to be addressed. And if you haven't already done so, consider subscribing to the channel. You'll get more notifications whenever I come out with videos like this one. If not, I do still hope to see you in the next video.